Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Now, thankfully, the 4080 Super was a much better received card than the original 4080 when it first came out. Stock levels have kind of leveled out a little bit more now because they were selling really quick, which basically brings us back to the way the old days used to be, in that you do have a choice about what graphics card that you can buy, rather than having to run out and panic buy and just grab the first thing that you can get your hands on. And by giving us that ability to make a choice, it actually means that the work that I do with reviews, like this review that we did with all of the 4080 Supers in the past, I'll ping the link up, it actually gives you a chance to go and see the prices and the performance with all the cards that you can get. Now, the Aorus Master isn't the cheapest graphics card out there, but it is a behemoth. And as you will see, it's pretty, like, it's a cooling god as well. But the critical point was, in the roundup, it wasn't the most expensive card that I tested, but it was pretty much across the board the fastest one that I had tested, which was a lovely note. It was actually the first time that I'd been able to get my hands on a Master as well, so I was very eager to put it head to head with some of the other brands, and to see it come up on top kind of made me feel that a little bit better I'd put the work in to get it. But then also kind of validates its huge size, because you are going to need a behemoth of a case to be able to fit this into. I would also, it doesn't matter whether you're going to put it vertical or horizontal, I would look at getting yourself some kind of funky support as well, because the weight of the card does even make the back of this case move a little bit, which is why I have fitted a brace to it, even in the vertical stance. And I'm using, normally I cut my vertical mounts up, but I've actually left this one with a big brace in the bottom and everything. And it is just because if you want a card with so much cooling, but without having to run the fan terrifically high, then it is going to end up adding weight. Now, as I said, it wasn't the most expensive one. I've just looked right today, and we are in April 2024. And it's £1,189, which actually puts it somewhere between 50 and 150 below some of the other vendors with their flagship cards, because effectively this is the flagship air-cooled card from Aorus, or Gigabyte, which way you want to swing with it. Now, the point in the video today is to show you the numbers that you can get with this tested today with today's drivers and another new game, because we're going to take a look at the New Horizon, which I will say is utterly beautiful. And I've actually been spoilt because I've been using and I've been testing and working on an OLED monitor when testing it, and oh my days, it is just such a treat for the eyes. Now, don't worry, I have got you some performance numbers to be able to run and show you anyway. So we'll do this. So 4K, we've done it, very high, everything turned up as much as we possibly could do. You get the numbers pumping out, and you're going to be getting, with this card and a 14900K, if you follow our undervolting guide, because with the undervolting guide stuff, there are people out there that are saying that they are seeing drop-offs in performance and that sort of stuff and errors. I haven't had a single problem here. I haven't been able to replicate it with one of the undervolted systems. So we'll just leave that out there and we'll move on. Anyway, Horizon is just so beautiful. That little fox, like, oh my days, makes me feel so sorry later on. But anyway, you're going to be getting above 70 and below 80 frames per second, give or take. And then when you bring DLSS in, it does bump it up a little bit, but I was a little bit more surprised with this, that it didn't go up that little bit further than it did, because we were normally sort of 83 to sort of 85 on this. But the difference comes when you put frame generation on. Now, this has come on in leaps and bounds. For my eyes on an OLED, I could not see the difference, but what it does mean is it bumps us right up above that 110 frames per second. And 110 frames per second with everything maxed out on 4K was a little bit nuts. Now with the graph, what I did do when I tested Horizon was I also tested the 4090 as well. Obviously we've tested all the other cards, but I specifically made sure I put the 4090 in there. And yes, it is faster. But we do need to remember it could be up to twice the price, and with some brands even more than that for those extra 30 frames per second. So switching on DLSS made a difference. It leveled the averages out, but didn't make a huge difference in FPS. But the frame gen was where the real kick came in and took us above that 110 frames per second average point. But as I said, this is with it absolutely maxed out, and with all the bells and whistles turned on as well. So we've done no optimizations at all. It's just a very simplistic, very high 4K, and then with DLSS, and then adding frame gen on it as well. We then move on to Cyberpunk, which is obviously still a crippler. We didn't go into the absolute bonkers insanity mode, but this was done with ultra ray tracing. And as you can see at the start, the frame rates are a little bit low. But again, like I said, we're not using the absolute insanity mode at the top. We're using the next one down. This is where when the game was introduced, this was as high as you could have turned it. But turning on that DLSS does make a healthy difference and does get us closer, I say closer, to the hallowed 60 frames per second average. But bringing in the frame generation, it then takes us up to a very healthy 85 frames per second. And as I said, don't forget, we have done no optimizations on this. We are just pretty much almost running it at max. It's the ultra setting, ultra ray tracing setting that we're using to and moving swiftly on to F1. Now you're going to ask why we're still doing 2022. 2022, well, technically when we moved on to 2023, there's been so many patches that have actually changed stuff throughout, but 2022 was quite consistent. So technically we need to run in and do a load more testing of 23 again. But because it's taken so long for them to sort it out, we have actually decided to just wait, because 2024 is not much far off. But we start with a 54 frames per second on normal, that is with ray tracing enabled, no DLSS. With the second slide, we move into over 100 frames per second with just DLSS enabled. So it doubled the frames per second with just DLSS. And by adding frame gen in as well, it took us over 136. So if you're running a G-Sync monitor, then you're going to be almost at that 144 Hz perfect tie-in. Although if you don't enable, well, you don't need to enable V-Sync, but if you're running a G-Sync monitor, it's going to be almost maxing your 144 Hz 4K screen out, and it still looks beautiful. So I'm really looking forward to see what they do with 2024 when that comes out. I think we're a few weeks out now. Anyway, if you are looking for a very high-end graphics card and you're trying to decide whether you want to buy a 4080S or a 4090, we're going to already assume that you've got the power supply that you're going to need to be able to power it. I'm going to say with a 4080S, don't go below a quality, and I do mean a quality branded 1000 watt. But I'm also going to assume that you've got a fair amount of budget. So if you've got a fair amount of budget and it's 4080, maybe a 4090, then you've obviously got big spuds, room on your credit card, room for disposable money. It's a very gifted place that you're sat in. But at that point, what I'm also going to say is 4090s are going to be horrendous money. A lot of them are up to and above that £2,000 price mark. And weirdly, with the Goldilocks principle, if you've ever heard of that, it does make the 4080 Super look good value. And at that point, I think once you have decided that you're going to stay around the 80 Super mark, that at that point, why don't you get yourself a pretty one? Why don't you get yourself a quiet one? Why don't you get yourself one that is one of the fastest available out the box? You don't need to overclock it. You don't need to change anything with it. And let's face facts, with this, throughout the testing stayed below 60 degrees. It didn't stay below 60 degrees, and I said didn't stay below 60 degrees because it spanned the fans very hard. It's just an incredibly capable cooler. So with an incredibly capable cooler, lots of lighting options on it. Yes, it's big, so make sure that you go careful with your case choices. Most modern cases that you're going to be choosing for your rig are more than likely going to be okay. But it's also, when you fit it, it's the width of the case that you have to think about just as much as the sort of length of the case. But maybe think about a vertical mount as well. But the critical point is, many frames per second, even AAA titles aren't crippling it. And it does look very pretty. And I think the only thing that the display system that we have being used today has taught us is that maybe Gigabyte needs to get brave and bring us an Aero version as well, because I do think that white is becoming so much more mainstream now that a master in white would be the icing on the cake.